I woke up on a quiet morning, sunlight filtering through the curtains and falling softly on the floor. Everything was perfectly normal, until a bright red message suddenly appeared before my eyes. The female supporting character's imitation progress has reached 80%. Before I could react, the next message appeared, its blood-red color sending chills down my spine. When progress reaches 100%, your status as a wealthy and beautiful woman will be completely replaced. My heart skipped a beat, as if someone had squeezed it. I am Wen Yu, the pampered daughter of the Wen Group, who has never lacked anything since childhood. A monthly allowance of 880,000 yuan, dining at high-end restaurants, and carrying limited edition handbags. This life, the envy of countless others, was now being meticulously copied and stolen by someone. A cold voice suddenly echoed in my head, seemingly from nowhere. Warning. After successful swapping, you will take on the other person's identity. Burdened with exorbitant interest rates, expelled from school for leaked private photos. I froze. The image of my roommate, whom I had always considered close, Lin Jing, immediately flashed before my eyes. She was imitating me, not unconsciously, but intentionally. From her voice, her intonation, her gait, to even her waist-length hair styled into identical waves. Before I thought it was just admiration, but now I understand. It was a plan, a terrifying plan to replace me. I remembered posting a travel photo on social media, just casually capturing the scenery, not paying much attention to it. Lin Jing had even made a sarcastic comment. This background looks so fake. I didn't notice. But the next day, an almost identical photo appeared on her account. Same angle, same lighting, even the expression was the same. The comments were a nauseating barrage of flattery. In the dorm, it wasn't that no one noticed. My best friend, Lu Shuiwei, finally couldn't hold back and bluntly criticized Lin Jing, asking if she felt disgusted by imitating me every day. But Lin Jing just calmly stroking her curly hair, saying that everyone has the right to pursue beauty, and that hairstyles weren't just for her. At that moment, the red text appeared before my eyes again. Cold and ruthless, she said. Imitation progress 80%. When it reaches 100%, your identity will be usurped. The female protagonist has borrowed heavily, and when the deadline passes, you will bear the debt, have your private photos leaked, and be expelled from school. I clenched my fists, finally understanding. She didn't just want to be like me, she wanted to become me, and then drag me down to hell. A thought flashed through my mind, and I turned to Lu Shuiwei, gently placing my hand on her shoulder, smiling as if nothing had happened. It's okay, I'm tired of this hairstyle anyway. I deliberately spoke loudly so everyone around could hear that Lin Jing just happened to like curly hair, and it had nothing to do with me. Immediately, everyone in the cafeteria turned their eyes to her, silently comparing. From her face, figure, to her demeanor, everything was frighteningly similar to me. No one said anything, but the contempt was evident in their eyes. Lin Jing was stared at so intensely that she lost her composure, jumped up, her face flushed, and yelled at me not to be arrogant, then hurried away. Lu Shuiwei turned to ask if I intended to forgive her, and I just shrugged, calmly replying that she hadn't broken any laws. But in my heart, I already had a different answer. I wasn't afraid of Lin Jing imitating me. What I feared was that one day she would stop. That afternoon, as the sun still hung low over the trees outside the school grounds, I left the dormitory and returned to the villa my parents had bought for me near the school. The space was so vast and quiet that every step I took echoed clearly. I stood before the mirror, looking at my waist-length hair, something I had meticulously cared for 18 years, and something Lin Jing had perfectly imitated. The red lettering still lingered before my eyes like a cold reminder. I gently ran my hand through my hair, my gaze gradually becoming resolute. If she wanted to imitate me, then I would change myself to the point where she couldn't keep up. Without another second's hesitation, I opened the drawer and took out the clippers. The sound of the machine running shattered the silence, like a signal to begin a new game. I looked at myself in the mirror, then decisively raised my hand. The clippers glided across my scalp, strands of long hair falling to the floor. There was no regret, only a strange sense of relief. When I completely shaved my head, I lifted my head, my face revealing sharp, defined features. I was no longer the familiar, gentle young lady, but a completely different person, cold, decisive, and unpredictable. But that wasn't enough. That night, I dyed my hair pink, a color so striking it was almost provocative. When I returned to the dorm, the moment I opened the door, I saw Lin Jing standing in front of the mirror. The moment she saw me, her face instantly changed. Her eyes widened, as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. When what are you doing? Her voice trembled. I just shrugged, calmly replying, just changing my hairstyle. She immediately became agitated, saying the hairstyle was too flashy, that it would embarrass the school and that I should dye it back. I gave a cold laugh and retorted, "What does that have to do with you? The school has a rule against dyeing hair. Does the school have a rule against dyeing hair this color?" Lin Jing was speechless, only able to stubbornly insist that the color didn't suit me. At that moment, Lu Shuiwei stood up abruptly, unceremoniously defending me, bluntly mocking that someone like Lin Jing didn't have the right to judge others. The atmosphere in the room became tense, but Lin Jing couldn't say anything more. That night, I posted a picture of myself on social media, a bald head dyed pink, my cold eyes staring straight into the camera. In a short time, the comments exploded. Some were surprised, some regretful, and some thought I was making things difficult for myself. But I didn't care, because I knew I had already taken the first step in this game. Sure enough, the next morning, Lu Shuiwei sent me a message with a picture, her tone full of schadenfreude. In the picture, Lin Jing also had pink hair, but the color was patchy, and the ends were burnt yellow from the poor quality dye. Her hairstyle looked incredibly bizarre, like a flawed version. I couldn't help but laugh. I chuckled. Clearly, I wasn't qualified, but I stubbornly insisted on imitating her to the very end. I stood in front of the mirror, took out a large, wavy black wig, and slowly put it on. In an instant, I was back to my familiar image, elegant, noble, as if nothing had happened. I subtly adjusted my hair, my eyes gleaming with coldness. I wondered how far Lin Jing could keep up with me this time. The game had only just begun. When I returned to the dorm wearing my large, wavy black wig, the hallway lights were on, casting long, yellow shadows on the tiled floor. As I pushed open the door, I saw Lin Jing standing in front of the mirror, clutching her pink hair, trying to smooth it down. But the cheap hair dye was obviously not enough to hold its color. The ends were already fading to a yellowish hue, looking both dry and messy. Hearing the sound, she turned around, her forced smile instantly freezing. Her gaze settled on my soft black hair. "You changed your hairstyle again?" Her voice trembled, unable to hide her panic. I walked in, casually placing my bag on the table, my fingers lightly stroking the wig, my tone nonchalant. "I thought about it, and you have a point. Pink is a bit too bright. Black suits me better." Lin Jing stood frozen in place, her lips moving but unable to utter a complete sentence. The pent-up anger and resentment flushed her face, her hands clenched so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Lu Shuiwei looked down from the bed and laughed uncontrollably. "What's wrong? Not laughing anymore? You usually laugh so much." The atmosphere in the room became stifling. Lin Jing didn't reply, only turned away, pretending to continue adjusting her hair, but the resentment in her eyes was undeniable. I said nothing more, just took out my book and started reading as if nothing had happened. But in my heart, every step of the calculation was clearer than ever. That evening, Lu Shuiwei and I went down to the cafeteria. We sat in our usual corner, the white light shining down on the table, the steam rising gently from the soup bowl. Lu Shuiwei rested her chin on her hand, poking at a piece of broccoli in her bowl as she asked, "Do you think she'll dye her hair black again tomorrow?" I smirked. "I bet 50 yuan she'll." As soon as I finished speaking, a dense stream of red text appeared before my eyes, so fast it almost obscured my vision. "Warning! The female protagonist is taking action. using voice-changing software. Target, your mother. My hand froze in midair. The text continued to appear, chillingly cruel. She impersonated your friend, calling to ask for money, using family ties to speed up the replacement process. A chill ran down my spine. My mother. She's usually soft-hearted and trusts me completely. If she heard a familiar voice pleading, she'd almost certainly be unable to refuse. Lin Jing dared to lay a hand on my family? Dudu, what's wrong? Lu Shuiwei noticed my changing expression and asked worriedly. I averted my gaze, scooped up a spoonful of soup, slowly swallowed it, and tried to keep my voice calm. Nothing. I just suddenly found changing my hairstyle all the time boring. So what do you want to change? Her eyes lit up, clearly very interested. How about a style change? I think you'd look great in Hanfu. I didn't reply immediately. The phone on the table vibrated softly. A message from my mother. Daughter, I just transferred 1 million yuan to you. Don't be stingy with your money. Oh, and your friend Lin Jing in the dorm treats you well too. I transferred 80,000 yuan to her as a thank you. I stared at the screen for a few seconds, then chuckled softly. Not happily, but coldly. Clever, I muttered to myself. Caught in my trap, she turns to using my mother. But unfortunately, the Wen family's money isn't that easy to get. I put down the phone, my gaze deepening. Changing styles isn't that great, I said, my voice light but firm. If you're going to change, you have to change to something she can't imitate. Lu Shuiwei tilted her head. For example? I subtly curved my lips, a cold glint flashing in my eyes. Next Wednesday is my birthday. I'm inviting the whole class out for a meal. The place. I'll choose. The news I just revealed immediately piqued Lu Shuiwei's interest. Before she could ask any further questions, I stood up, took a sip of water, and casually remarked that it had been a while since we'd all gathered together. So it was a change of scenery. But deep down, I knew this wasn't an ordinary party. It was a carefully planned trap. My birthday was on a Wednesday, and from that afternoon, the entire class had already started heading to the venue I'd booked, a high-end hotel in the city. Crystal chandeliers blazed brightly. A red carpet stretched from the entrance to the lobby. Every detail so exquisite it was breathtaking. When Lu Shuiwei and I entered, almost all eyes turned to me. Some were surprised, others marveled. Lin Jing stood in a corner, wearing a dress almost identical to mine. A flicker of tension crossed her eyes, but she managed to maintain a smile. Quickly adjusting her expression, she stepped forward, her voice soft as if nothing had happened, and said, When she wished me a happy birthday, I just nodded slightly, showing no reaction. Throughout the party, I barely paid attention to her, only occasionally chatting with friends and raising a glass to toast. Everything unfolded like a lavish party befitting a wealthy young lady. But I knew Lin Jing was observing my every gesture, from the way I held my glass to the way I smiled. She tried to memorize everything like a copycat, but the more she watched, the clearer the difference between us became, a difference she could never grasp. As the party neared its end, her eyes began to waver, clearly unable to withstand the pressure, yet she still tried to maintain her composure. Lu Shuiwei, standing beside me, chuckled softly, whispering that today had been an eye-opener for her. I didn't reply, only calmly glanced at Lin Jing, knowing full well that this was only the beginning. I was in control of this game, and the more she tried to imitate me, the more she would only be digging her own grave. The party ended with boisterous laughter and chatter, but I knew it was just the beginning. As expected, on Friday night, Lin Jing suddenly sent a message to the class group, saying she'd recently earned some extra money from her part-time job and wanted to treat everyone to karaoke to relax. She even included the location, a famous high-end club in the city. The message immediately sparked a lively discussion. Everyone was surprised by her generosity, as she'd never been so extravagant before. Some even joked that she must have struck it rich. Lin Jing modestly replied a few words, then deliberately mentioned me, asking if I was coming, saying we hadn't had a drink together last time. I glanced at my phone and chuckled softly, knowing exactly where her money came from and what she intended to do. Lu Shuiwei, standing beside me, couldn't help but mutter, asking where she got the money from. Was she going to rob a bank? I calmly replied, maybe she won the lottery. At exactly 7 o'clock that evening, Lu Shuiwei and I arrived. As soon as we opened the door to the private room, it was packed with people, dimly lit. The atmosphere was lively, filled with the pulsating music. Lin Jing, wearing a brand new dress almost identical to the one I was wearing, stood amidst the crowd, smiling brightly. As soon as she saw me, she immediately raised her voice to greet me, as if wanting everyone's attention, saying she had specially reserved a seat for me. Lu Shuiwei subtly frowned and muttered something insincere. I didn't respond, just went straight to the song selection table, feeling amused by her increasingly obvious act. A moment later, Lin Jing brought 2 glasses of wine to me, saying that she was in the wrong about what happened before and hoped I wouldn't hold a grudge. In front of so many people, refusing would seem petty, so I accepted the wine and clinked glasses lightly as a gesture of farewell. Just then, her phone rang. A glint of confidence flashed in her eyes, and she turned to order the most expensive drinks. Several bottles of high-priced imported liquor were brought to the table, but she didn't hesitate. Her friends cheered and encouraged her, the atmosphere becoming increasingly boisterous. I found her attempts at being generous ridiculous, knowing full well that the money was merely a temporary loan, insufficient for long-term use. Sure enough, not long after, Lin Jing's phone rang again. This time, her face instantly turned pale, but she still managed to remain calm and hung up. Immediately afterward, the door to the private room was forcefully pushed open, and 3 men in black suits entered, their cold gazes instantly freezing the atmosphere. The leader walked straight to Lin Jing, presented a debt collection notice stating that the amount she borrowed plus interest had reached over 120,000 yuan, and demanded immediate payment. The entire room fell silent, all eyes fixed on her. Lin Jing initially tried to refuse, but under the pressure she could only grit her teeth and accept the money, transferring it on the spot. After they left, she immediately turned back, forcing a smile, explaining that she had simply forgotten to repay a small loan, something insignificant, and continued to say that she would still treat everyone to a drink that night. Many people believed her and laughed along, but I silently observed because I knew her account was almost depleted. Yet she still tried to maintain her image by ordering more expensive food and drinks. As time went on, her expression became increasingly unpleasant, but she didn't dare stop until the final bill arrived, totaling over 200,000 yuan. The whole room suddenly fell silent. No one dared to speak. Lin Jing held the bill, her hands trembling noticeably, her eyes darting around as if searching for a way out. But there was no way. She could only look at me with a pleading look, while I silently looked back at her, knowing that the moment I had been waiting for had finally arrived. This play had reached its climax, and the one about to collapse was none other than her. Lin Jing looked at me with a clearly pleading gaze, her hands clutching the bill, trembling slightly. The room was so silent that you could hear the music echoing from outside. She bit her lip as if struggling for a long time, then finally stepped towards me, her voice lowered, almost pleading, asking if I could lend her the money now, promising to repay it later. I looked at her for a moment without saying anything. In the past, I might have softened, but now things were different. Lu Shuiwei, standing beside me, couldn't help but laugh coldly, bluntly saying that she wasn't asking to borrow money, but rather to live off others. Lin Jing's face flushed red, but she still tried to maintain a pitiful tone, saying that she was just temporarily in difficulty and hoped for my help. I slightly curled my lips and asked what guarantee she could repay it, because I knew her family's circumstances were such that she couldn't afford such a large sum. This made her face instantly turn pale, her eyes flashing with a mixture of shame and anger, but she still didn't dare to contradict me. Whispers began to spread around, some people becoming suspicious. Someone complained that the atmosphere had become more stifling than ever. I looked at her for a moment and said that money wasn't impossible to lend, but there was a condition. Lin Jing immediately looked up as if grasping at a lifeline and asked me what the condition was. I stated very clearly that she had to go back in front of everyone and admit that I paid for all the expenses tonight, not her. As soon as she heard this, her expression froze as if she had been doused with cold water. She hesitated for a long time, her eyes constantly shifting, because if she admitted it, the entire image she had tried to build would completely collapse. But if she didn't, the consequences would be even more terrifying. Finally, after a few seconds of silence, she gritted her teeth and nodded in agreement, saying she would do as I asked if I could help her get through this. I looked at her without saying anything more, just turned and walked towards the private room, her heavy footsteps following behind. When we opened the door and entered, all eyes in the room immediately turned towards us. The previously lively atmosphere became tense. Lin Jing stood in the middle of the room, took a deep breath, and told everyone that tonight, she wasn't actually the one inviting us, but that I was paying to help. As soon as she finished speaking, the room buzzed with excitement. Many people showed surprise. Some forced a smile as if they understood something, and their gazes towards her changed noticeably from admiration to suspicion, even contempt. Lin Jing stood there, her face pale, but she still tried to remain calm. I just stood aside, watching the scene unfold, my heart unmoved, because this was the outcome she had chosen herself. But at that moment, the door was pushed open again. This time, the person who entered wasn't an employee, but a familiar man, Song Ying. The sharp-witted man stared straight at us with a look of dissatisfaction, then walked straight to Lin Jing, helping her up as if she were the victim. His voice carried a clear, protective tone as he asked if she was all right. Lin Jing's eyes immediately reddened as if she had found a support, leaning against him without saying anything. But her expression was one of suffering, easily misinterpreted by outsiders. Lu Shuiwei immediately became angry and was about to speak, but I stopped her with my hand, silently watching the scene before me. My heart grew even colder because I knew that from this moment on, everything was no longer simply a game of imitation, but had become a much bigger game. And my opponent was no longer just Lin Jing alone. Song Yingxing stood in front of Lin Jing, his cold eyes staring at me as if I were the one at fault. Without asking for the full story, he concluded that I was bullying others, his words carrying a familiar contempt that made Lu Shuiwei so angry she almost lunged forward, but I held her back. I looked at him for a long time, my heart no longer wavering as before, only feeling amused because I finally understood his true nature. Lin Jing stood behind him, feigning weakness, occasionally tugging at his sleeve as if to stop him. But in reality, it only made him believe even more that she was being bullied. The eyes of those around us began to shift. Some hesitated, others were swayed by emotions and began to lean towards Lin Jing. I didn't rush to explain. I calmly looked at her and asked a very soft question. Do you want to recount the entire incident in front of everyone? The simple question made her face turn pale. She shook her head, stammering that she knew nothing. Song Yingxing became even more dissatisfied, thinking I was forcing her to confess. I chuckled softly, each word carefully chosen. The words clearly stated that she was the one who invited the whole class here, but when it came time to pay, she didn't have money and came to me for help. My only condition was that she tell the truth. My words were neither fast nor slow, but loud enough for everyone to hear clearly. Whispers gradually arose in the room, and skeptical glances once again turned towards Lin Jing. She stood there, her whole body stiff, as if cornered. Finally, with red eyes, she could only apologize and admit that she shouldn't have been so proud, that she shouldn't have tried to do things beyond her capabilities. Her words sounded pitiful, but she skillfully portrayed herself as the weaker party, causing some people to begin to feel sorry for her. Leaving the club, the cool night air outside cleared my head. Lu Shuiwei was still annoyed, constantly complaining about how outrageous those two were. I remained silent for a moment, then took out my phone and looked at the message I'd just received from my parents. The content was brief but clear enough. They had agreed to cancel the engagement with Song Yingxing. The rest was up to me to decide. I chuckled inwardly. Finally, I was free from any constraints. Behind me, his previous schemes were finally paying the price. Seeing my silence, Lu Shuiwei tilted her head and asked what I was thinking. I shook my head and said nothing, just that some things should end. The neon lights outside reflected on the car window, creating scattered streaks of light, like fragments of a fading dream. I knew Lin Jing wouldn't stop because she had gone too far to turn back, and the only thing she could cling to now was Song Yingxing. But she didn't know that the foundation behind him had long been shaky. All it took was to withdraw. A fulcrum, and everything would crumble in an instant. A few days later, news began spreading throughout the school about the 70-year anniversary celebration, a major event that almost all students and faculty would attend. I stood by the window of my room, looking down at the schoolyard where banners were being hung, the wind making them flutter, signaling the start of a performance. A clear thought suddenly flashed through my mind. If we're going to end it, we have to end it completely. A small party wouldn't be enough to make them realize their mistakes. But a stage in front of the whole school is different. There, all eyes are focused, all words are exaggerated, and all mistakes cannot be hidden. I turned around and saw Lu Shuiwei lying on the bed playing with her phone. Then, slowly, she said that the upcoming gala night would be very interesting. She immediately jumped up and asked me what my plans were. I just smiled and didn't answer because some things should only be announced at the right time. Meanwhile, in another corner of the school, Lin Jing was also preparing for that night. She had tried every way to get an identical dress to mine and even heard that I would be giving a speech on stage as a student representative. For her, that was like her last chance to complete her replacement. I could almost imagine her standing in front of the mirror, practicing every word, trying to perfectly copy my voice and demeanor. But she didn't know that from the beginning, I had prepared everything for that moment. A stage large enough to expose everything, and bright enough to leave no dark corners for her to hide in. This game had gone on too long, and it was time for the curtain to fall. Only this time, when the curtain fell, the person standing in the center wouldn't be her, but the truth. She's been trying to hide it all this time. The final gala night finally arrived. The school's grand hall was brightly lit, soft music filled the air, and the sounds of lively conversation mingled. I entered with Lu Shuiwei, dressed in a simple yet elegant gown, effortlessly striking. As usual, many eyes immediately followed us, but this time I didn't feel bothered. Everything seemed like a prearranged performance. On the other side, Lin Jing had arrived very early. She wore a dress almost identical to mine, standing before the registration desk, smiling gently as she accepted compliments from everyone. At first glance, one might mistake us for each other, but the more you looked, the more awkward her gestures became, like a perfect copy trying to be so unnatural. Song Yingxing stood beside her, her eyes full of pride, as if she were the brightest star here. This only made me laugh. When the host announced the start of the ceremony, the atmosphere in the hall immediately quieted down, and the performances proceeded one after another until the student representative's speech. The stage lights swept across the rows of seats. Just then, Lin Jing suddenly stood up, faster than me, and strode straight onto the stage. Her voice rang out clearly. "Hello, everyone, I'm Wen Yu." The entire hall froze for a moment. Some were surprised, some were suspicious, while Song Yingxing wore a satisfied smile, as if everything was going according to plan. Lin Jing took a deep breath, took out her phone, and was about to read her prepared speech. But in a second, her expression changed completely. Her hand trembled as she stared at the screen, unable to believe what was appearing. I stood up and walked slowly onto the stage, under the gaze of hundreds of people. As I approached, I gently took the microphone from her hand, calmly saying that perhaps this student was too nervous and had made a slight mistake, and that I could continue my part. The lights focused on me again, and behind me, the large screen suddenly lit up. But instead of the expected presentation, a barrage of data appeared, detailing the entire history of usurious loans, debt collection messages, counterfeit purchase invoices, and even conversations between Lin Jing and the sellers. Everything was laid bare before everyone's eyes. Nothing was missed. A murmur erupted like a tidal wave in the hall. Lin Jing, standing beside me, seemed to lose all strength, her legs trembling, unable to stand. Before she could react, the final video appeared on the screen. Images of Song Yingxing transferring money, accompanied by promises of taking over my family's assets and giving her a luxurious life. Then the entire hall completely exploded with chatter. No one could remain calm anymore. Song Yingxing jumped up, her face pale, pointing at me but unable to speak. I looked down at the audience, my voice still calm, and said, "Over the past time, you've probably heard a lot about people trying to be like me, but I want to say that no matter how much they imitate, their nature cannot change, and the truth will eventually be revealed." Lin Jing slumped to the ground. She stepped off the stage, tears streaming down her face, while Song Yingxing stood frozen amidst the critical gazes from all sides. At that moment, I knew this game was over. There was no turning back for any of them. The atmosphere in the hall erupted with a flurry of chatter spreading everywhere. Eyes filled with both curiosity and contempt were fixed on Lin Jing and Song Yingxing. Some were filming with their phones, others were whispering amongst themselves. No one could maintain their initial composure. Lin Jing slumped to the stage, her hands trembling as if trying to cover everything. But she couldn't hide the clear evidence being projected behind her. Song Yingxing stood frozen for a few seconds before reacting. He rushed onto the stage, trying to snatch the microphone from my hand, his voice full of anger as he demanded to know what I was doing. Before he could touch me, security intervened, his eyes no longer arrogant but filled with panic and rage. I looked at him calmly, as if looking at a stranger, and said that the truth had existed for a long time. It was just that everyone was seeing it today. Below the stage, the murmurs grew louder. Some began mentioning the Song family's recent financial instability, with others linking it to investments from the Wen family being withdrawn. Like disparate pieces now piecing together into a complete picture, their reputations crumbled right before everyone's eyes. Just then, Song Yingxing's phone rang incessantly. He stared at the screen, his face growing paler. But he didn't dare answer, as if he already knew what bad news awaited him. Lin Jing, meanwhile, completely lost control. She shook her head repeatedly, muttering that it wasn't true, as if trying to deny everything. But the more she spoke, the more powerless she became, because no one believed her anymore. I said nothing more, simply put the microphone back in its place, turned, and left the stage. The lights behind me still shone on the undeniable evidence, a truth that could not be denied. As I stepped downstairs, Lu Shuiwei immediately ran to me, grabbing my hand, her eyes filled with excitement and glee, saying that finally it was time for those two to pay the price. I just smiled faintly, saying nothing, because inwardly I was very calm, as if it had been predetermined long ago. At the end of the banquet, everything had completely spiraled out of control, forcing the organizers to end it early. Lin Jing was stopped backstage by debt collectors from the company, her sobs echoing as she pleaded for Song Yingxing's help. But he was too preoccupied to even look at himself, so he could only stand there, avoiding her gaze. His parents also rushed in, their faces contorted with anger. They scolded him mercilessly, then turned to apologize to me, but I only shook my head, saying that everything was clear and there was no need to say more. What the Wen family had done to them was now over. Their eyes immediately darkened, understanding that this time there was no chance of redemption. When everyone left, the hallway became quiet. I stood there for a moment, watching Lin Jing being dragged away. The magnificent dress she wore now seemed out of place, the rhinestones falling to the ground like the fleeting dreams she clung to finally shattering completely. Lu Shuiwei, standing beside her, couldn't hide her excitement, saying that this scene was well-deserved. I let out a sigh of relief, feeling as if an invisible rope had been cut in my heart. From this moment on, I knew clearly that no one could replace me anymore. Not because I had defeated them, but because from the beginning I was never someone who could be replaced. From now on, my life would be in my own hands, not some clumsy copy. In the following days, the school was almost in chaos because of the events of the prom night. News spread so quickly that by morning it had become the topic of discussion everywhere, from the school hallways to the cafeteria. Everyone was mentioning the names Lin Jing and Song Yingxing with all sorts of speculations and judgments. I walked past those stairs calmly, as if it had nothing to do with me. Lu Shuiwei, on the other hand, couldn't help but chime in with a few gleeful comments whenever she heard anyone gossiping, making the atmosphere even more boisterous. Lin Jing's dormitory was quickly cleared out, leaving only a few odds and ends and a pile of debt collection papers scattered on the desk, like the last trace of her time there. I glanced at them once, then casually gathered them up and threw them into the trash without hesitation, as if erasing an insignificant page in my life. The school quickly decided to suspend Lin Jing from her studies for further investigation, while the Song family's situation was even worse. Investments were withdrawn and financial irregularities were reported. The scandal was exposed, causing their company to plummet uncontrollably. News online constantly updated, almost completely destroying their reputation. I didn't need to do anything more because everything was already operating on the trajectory I had set beforehand. One morning, I went to the canteen with Lu Shuiwei to buy soy milk and have a snack as usual. Sunlight streamed through the glass onto the table, creating a rare feeling of warmth after a series of chaotic days. While eating, she asked me what I planned to do next. I thought for a moment and said that perhaps I should return to a normal life, study, and then later take over the family business. Lu Shuiwei immediately exclaimed that I was getting too serious again, but still smiled and said she would follow me to the end. We talked as we walked towards the library, laughter mixed with sunlight, making everything feel lighter.